The Supreme Court is set to rule on a case involving LGBTQ content in schools very soon.
Parents of elementary school students are arguing that their religious rights were violated since Montgomery County schools did not provide an opt-out option for LGBTQ-related content.
Here to tell us more about the case is the Hill's courts and legal reporter Zach Schonnfeld. Zach, you've been on the ground covering this. What's the latest?
Hey, Robby. Coming out of these oral arguments yesterday, it does seem that the Supreme Court is leaning towards siding with those parents who say that Montgomery County's lack of an opt-out option for their children to not be exposed to those books with LGBTQ themes in elementary schools, that is a substantial burden on their free exercise rights under the First Amendment. So they say that it amounts to the point where the Supreme Court needs to allow them to have this opt-out option. And like I said, coming out of these arguments, it did seem that especially among the Supreme Court's conservative majority, that they were inclined by the end of that argument, which lasted about 2.5 hours, to side with those parents. We heard especially some of this criticism from Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who was one of Donald Trump's appointees to the court. He himself is actually a resident of Montgomery County. He talked about that he's lived there his whole life, and he actually said at one point that he was mystified by what the county was doing here. Let's take a listen.
And Montgomery County has been a beacon of that religious liberty for all these years, with a strong Catholic population, a substantial Jewish population, lots of different Protestant. I mean, you drive down any Connecticut Avenue or George Avenue, you see religious building after religious building. And I guess I'm surprised, given that this is the hill we're going to die on in terms of not respecting religious liberty.
And in fact, right at the end of the argument, Justice Kavanaugh had told the lawyer for Montgomery County, he said he did a good job, but that it was a tough argument, which is never something that a lawyer wants to hear, is as dead a giveaway as any of where the court is headed here.
Now, Zach, on the other side of this argument is Ketanji Brown Jackson, who repeatedly expressed concern, saying basically, if you allow families to opt out of learning from LGBTQ plus books, where will it end? So what else is she worried about?
Yeah, this is something that we heard from both her as well as some of the other liberal justices. They kept drawing issues they were raising concerns that there was no way to draw lines here, and that, even if they agreed that these parents and their objections, they should be given an opt-out option, they were concerned about a flood of cases that could potentially happen after this ruling. In addition to that, Justice Jackson, who is President Biden's sole appointee to the court, we also heard her talk about, these other options that parents have. She was, raising questions about, is it really a substantial burden on them exercising their religion when they do have other options, for example, to homeschool their children or to send them to private schools. Now, the parents' attorney pushed back on that, talking about the financial costs that, of course, come along with that. But certainly, despite the court's conservatives leaning towards the parents, we did see a lot of pushback during that 2.5 oral argument by the court's liberals, but particularly Justice Jackson.
And Zach, did we see some tension between the justices themselves? I saw reports that, who was it? Was it Sotomayor and Alito arguing over who was interrupting who? That's kind of an unusual amount of acrimony from between the justices themselves, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I saw that really on display in that courtroom yesterday. There was that moment where Justice Alito was talking and Justice Sotomayor seemed to try to jump in, which, does often happen where the justices kind of try to drive the conversation back to where they wanted to go. But as I saw her, look over and try to jump in, it was the Chief Justice, John Roberts, who is essentially, running who gets to speak when. And he kind of gave her a glare as almost to say, don't jump in, let Justice Alito have his turn. So I think that's certainly right, that there was a bit of that, back and forth and kind of glares going between the justices, even more than we see in a normal case.
The Hill's Zach Schonnfeld, thank you so much for joining us to break that down.
Thanks for having me.
All right, it's always fun to have a new guest host because I don't know exactly what you're going to say on any given topic. What are your thoughts on this subject? Let's just kick it off.
I don't think this is a curriculum overhaul. I think it's a moment of representation. And I think it's important to look specifically at the books. So I took the time to try to read over these books and say, what are kids involved in? I have a 3-year-old. I'm very involved in my kid's life and plan on being while she's in school. But when you're talking about books like Pride Puppy, where a puppy gets lost at a pride parade, are you telling me that your kid is never going to see a pride parade? You're never going to have to explain to them what that might be? And you're sheltering them for something so sacred or so, jarring to them that they can't be told about what this is? We're not asking them to be coerced into a lifestyle they didn't agree to. We're telling them to be exposed so that they're not judgmental and so that they don't become human beings who are not accepting of others.
Oof. Well, we are going to fight about this then. I don't know that I mean, do I care? No, but if you don't want your kid to read Pride Puppy at age 4, just to be introduced to themes about gender and sex at that age, it's just like that's too young to. We're still doing what are the ABCs and what sound does the cow make at that age. You have to be like, these are parades for people who often participate in like sexual fetish type stuff. That just doesn't seem. Not that I want intolerance of those things, and I don't care at all, but. If parents object to that, I don't see why why they should be forced to say, sorry, we've decided your kids are going to have exposure to these things at age 4.
Well, I agree. I don't think that we should be talking about sex. I don't even think that books should include kissing. Oh, I like this girl or boy. That's irrelevant to an elementary school kid, in my opinion. I was talking about actually just seeing and experiencing like a parade or seeing someone in your family get married. But I also think that it's important to understand that, this is opening up Pandora's box. So if you decide that you want parents to be involved this deeply in what your religion says, then we shouldn't learn the Big Bang Theory in science class, because that also counteracts with your religion if you're a Christian and you read the Bible, right? That doesn't actually line up with the Big Bang Theory, the origins of the universe.
Well, not
so where
all.
will we stop?
Not all. I was raised Catholic. There's no objection to the scientific origins of the universe from the Catholic perspective. Where it stops is, I guess, giving parents more control over the kind of educational experience their children receive. I might not agree with all those choices, but I am generally in favor of giving more options to families, because children it's their children. It's not, they don't belong to the state, they don't belong to the school, they don't belong to the teachers. Some of these questions are going to end up being difficult, and even on this subject, look, I think where I'm most sympathetic to the argument the school is making is like, look, well, we can't stop kids from just discussing, like, what if a kid does a presentation, on a group project that touches on some LGBT themes? Are we supposed to are we supposed to shield the other kid's eyes? And that makes, that seems not feasible to kind of enforce that kind of thing.
What if your teacher is in a relationship with another man or woman, and their wife comes to bring them lunch to school, or these are just normal life things.
Yeah, but
they shouldn't be
more about. Well, they don't need to be giving more details about their lives anyway. Right? It's
to students, but it's more of an interaction and exposure so that your kid understands that people different from them exist out there, even if it's not your particular religion.
Some of these books, I don't know about Pride Puppy.
That was
there are puppies at Pride. It's a whole different thing. So I don't know. Some of these books are. I've looked at them, and they are kind of graphic. I don't know that these are the ones in contention here or for young people, but that they contain drawings that have graphic depictions of sexual activity.
Well,
and
no,
they're saying,
that's far. I think there has to be nuance here. Some of these books
on classroom shelves. If parents are saying, I don't want these on the library shelves, I don't.
But sexual activity is an extreme statement, right? So some of these books do have like a girl liking another girl and kissing towards the end of the book, which I also don't think needs to be in an elementary school book, right? Some of these books have
a graphic depiction of how to perform oral sex.
That is not in schoolhouses. No,
that's in one of these books.
No, but not the books that we're talking about that are in this case.
Maybe not in this case, but again, I say, well, I think that should be. I don't have any problem with parents being more involved in these things. Now, I would say to the religious families, I guess, that if you think just encountering a book is going to radically alter your kids' sexuality or gender expression or weaponize them against your religion, is being a little silly, and that's thinking these books have some kind of seductive power to warp our minds. So I think the freak out about them might be hyperbolic, but you know what? It's not my kid. It's your choice. It's your family. It's your kid. Organize your life however you see fit is my overriding procedure.
And I think you can either have the conversation with your kid, allow the schools to do the curriculum, not emotionally through thought process of what belongs in a curriculum, or you can let your kid learn on the internet. And we see that slippery slope. So they're going to look it up, right? If it's not elementary school, it's middle school.
Well, but what's wrong with that?
Well, I think they need to have a conversation. Don't you think you need to understand it properly? Your parents want so much authority over your school, and they should tell you about these things.
Well, the school wants authority over this is a debate. The school is trying to claim authority to educate these kids on these matters, to introduce them to these themes at as young an age as they feel proper. They're disproportionately staffed by liberal and progressive people. These are conservative parents who don't agree with the ideologies or the priorities.
But curriculums are not emotional. Curriculums are actually put in place by people who study what belongs in schooling, like how we decided the curriculum on race, how we decided the curriculum on slavery, that belongs in textbooks so we know our history. These are actual human beings that just are different from you, and you might totally disagree with their lifestyle, but this is just something that's going to come up in life. And I think it's important to arm your children with understanding people different from you in order to make them a better person. I mean, that's just it's part of life. You can't shield them from what actually exists out there.
I also object. One of my friends, Megan McCardle, she's a writer for the Washington Post, was looking at the actual books in issue, and one of them is, I guess, just on LGBT heroes throughout history that celebrates Alexander the Great, because many conquerors were very unkind to the people on the land they took control of, but Alexander was against taking slaves and forcing women to get married. When food came in for the troops, he made sure everyone else ate first. This is some pro-Alexander the Great historical revisionism. This was a brutal conqueror. This is very silly.
I don't
Very
agree with
silly.
rewriting history. There's nuance.
They're rewriting
sure.
history
There's
to be
nuance,
pro-LGBT. He happened to be gay, but was still a brutal tyrant. Because history is messy. So I don't. Just putting that out there.
I agree that parents belong in the conversation, but I also don't agree that shielding kids makes it unreal.
Don't come at me if you're a big Alexander the Great fan. I'm a fan as well. I just don't think we need to, pretend it was all holding hands, men's hands or women's hands. It was not like that. Up next on Rising, an aggressive shakeup at Marco Rubio's State Department. We will discuss.